Good evening and welcome to the latest in University Consultants of America's ongoing Coronavirus Initiative series. This is a chance for us to share information with all of you about how the college admissions process is currently being disrupted by the health crisis we are all living through and all the social distancing that entails. Today's topic is going to be standardized tests, more specifically the SAT and ACT. We will talk about what has changed and what has not changed and what you should be doing about that. I am Bill Watson Canning, William. Those of you who are hoping to see Bob Levine here this evening, we changed around some of our scheduling, but in any event, you can see some information there about who I am, my background, but let's move on to standardized testing. So when we talk about standardized tests, just so we're clear for these purposes, we're talking about the SAT or ACT. Now, for those of you who are my age or older, you remember when those were not interchangeable tests. They are completely interchangeable tests now. So mom and dad, if you're wondering which one your student should take, either one, whichever one your student feels better situated for. There are some differences between the tests, a little more science in terms of the reading, shorter sections, what have you. But basically, you're talking a few hours on a Saturday morning to take it, and every school in the United States treats them interchangeably. The other test I want to mention that you should be considering are the SAT subject tests. You may need 2 subject tests, or even 3 in the case of Georgetown, depending on where you are applying. So that is something else you want to consider. The SAT ACT tests your generalized knowledge about math and reading. The SAT subject tests are a chance for you to show what you can do when you dive more deeply into a subject, kind of exactly like what you will be doing at a university. Now, as you are no doubt aware, a lot of things are being canceled nowadays, have already been canceled. April ACT test date did not happen. The May test date for the SATs that normally happens every year is not happening. We know why. It's quite literally not safe for us to gather in groups of 10 or more. So the antithetical to the social distancing protocol is now underway. As of this moment, the June test dates are still on for both the SAT and ACT. That's June 6th for the SAT, June 13th for the ACT. We have not yet heard that those will be canceled. Some of those test dates may have filled up already. I do encourage you to get signed up for a test date as soon as possible. That said, if I had a crystal ball, well, for one thing, I probably wouldn't be sitting here doing webinars, but it is, of course, entirely possible that June date may be canceled as soon as you can. And you are not necessarily able to do this yet, in fact, not able to do this yet. I encourage you to get a test date for either August or the fall for either of these tests. We do not want you to be stuck in a situation where you cannot take the test. Now, I am sure some of you are aware that one of the recent changes that is going on is that several schools have gone test optional for the class of 2021, in some cases even a few classes beyond that. I'm always hesitant to put up a list because since I've launched this webinar, it's entirely possible 3 new schools have added themselves to it. But just some prominent schools that have already come out with the test optional policy for this next year: Tufts, Northeastern, Boston University, all of the University of California schools, Williams and Amherst, some of my favorite small schools, Oregon. These are schools that will evaluate your application next year, even if you were not able to get the SAT or ACT test or the subject test. All right, let's talk a little bit about test optional strategy. First of all, it does not mean that they are going to completely ignore a test if you report it. If you take the SAT and get an outstanding score and you tell Tufts about it, Tufts is going to be happy to hear about it. In fact, it's going to help your application. So by all means, go ahead and try to take the test, partly because there are plenty of schools that are still going to expect to see that test score, and I don't want you to be stuck without a test. But also, if you do well, it's going to help you. Now, one reason these schools have gone test optional is that they are fully aware with all the canceled test dates. It may be difficult for you to get that test lined up. It may be difficult for you to take the test. You may not have a score that you're quite as happy with. They totally understand that. That said, understand that what test optional means is not just that they put you all on a level playing field. It means that when they are evaluating your academic credentials, the work you do at your school, your GPA, is going to weigh that much more strongly. If you are a C+ student and you are applying to Tufts, one of the finest universities in the country, GPA is not going to cut it. So, it's not a get out of jail free card. Where test optional has historically been most advantageous is in the case of a student whose test scores do not adequately reflect her academic standing. So for example, this most recent year, I had a student who sort of straight A's all across the board, but just when she took the test, it was not a score that was sort of aligned with that. So she did go test optional because she knew that her transcript could support her academic potential in addition to recommendation letters and what have you. And she is currently deciding between, give away the game if I say too much, but two very, very fine universities. I would consider top 30 or so universities. So test optional can be a good strategy if your test is not aligned. But for right now, it's April. If you're not applying until the fall, let's still proceed as if you were going to be able to take a test and get a score that you were happy with. By the way, that fairtest.org URL is where you can monitor changes to test optional schools. As I say, it's evolving constantly. All right, so let's get back. You've got, for your planning, plan to take either the SAT or ACT. Plan to take the writing section of that test. Yes, I know it's optional for some schools, but you don't want to be in a situation where you have a school that expects it. Even the schools that expect it, they tend to look at other things to evaluate your writing, but just don't leave yourself in a situation where you get to November or December, you've got a school you really want to apply to, and now you have to take the test again and scramble to find a test center because you don't have a writing section. Same thing for the subject tests. Plan to take 2 subject tests for your applications. Recognizing that, again, these requirements every year change into the fall, even sometimes after application season has started on August 1st. Question that students often have: how many times should I plan to take the test? Here's an idea: once, and do really, really well when you do it. Now, why do I say that? Well, basically, psychologically, I don't want you ever going in there to take the test just to see. It's one of our biggest pet peeves at UCA for a few reasons. Number one, even before social distancing, there are probably better, more enjoyable ways to spend 3 hours on a Saturday morning than sitting in a classroom filling out bubble sheets with a number 2 pencil. Second of all, there are some schools that will actually see every instance of you taking the test. Certainly, if you're going to try and report a super score, you're going to have to report all the components that went into your super score. Super scoring, if you're not clear, is when you take your best reading score, let's say on the SAT, and your best math score, and you mash them together. That's great for the universities because they get to report higher test scores among their average incoming students. But guess what? They're going to see the components that went into that. So if you have a really terrible reading score and a high math score, and then you're reporting a different reading score another time, they're still going to see that low one. So just be aware of that. But most of all, I want you going in, having studied, feeling prepared, and ready to knock it out of the park. Now, realistically, are you going to take it more than once? Probably, and here's why. In most cases, students sort of find that they're just a little shy of some threshold that they want to be at. You're hoping for a 1400 on your SAT, and you have a 1370, and you're saying, oh, let me just take it one more time and see if I can get those extra 30 points. So yes, go ahead, have a backup test date in there. But please, 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 if you are taking the June test date and it happens, don't go in there just to see. All right, what are the best ways to prepare for your standardized tests? There are basically 4 ways you can do it. The first is not at all. I don't advise that. There is the occasional super genius, usually kind of 1 in the high school at a time, not even 1 per grade, just sort of 1 in the high school, I was thinking of my friend Nick from high school, who could see how things would simplify by 4/17 in his head without having to think about it. But I assume most of you are not attending a webinar on a Thursday evening because you're planning on not preparing at all. Second way is with a book. This is a cost-effective way to do it. A good book costs, I don't know, 20, 30 bucks. We'll have some sample questions in there. If you are really disciplined, if you're really good at kind of the self-focused stuff, this might work for you. Most of us when we're 17, most of us when we're considerably older than 17, we don't need a little more structure than that to prepare effectively for something as major as the SAT. In addition, you're not going to necessarily be as aware of the gaps that you might have. It's very hard to be self-aware enough to see exactly where it is that you're running into trouble. So a step above a book is taking a class. There are online classes. Almost everything's online now, right? Kaplan, test centers, what have you. Classes can be good. At least they give you some of that accountability. They give you some structure. They keep you focused. A couple of issues with the with the class. Number one, you don't necessarily know how well trained the teacher is. Quite frankly, a lot of these classes use recent college graduates who are looking for a little extra cash. These aren't necessarily people who are deeply trained in understanding these standardized tests. But the bigger problem with the class is it moves at whatever pace it's going to move. I am sure that you're aware when you sit in a classroom these days, virtual class these days, but you've been in a class that is either moving way ahead of you. They're on advanced calculus and you're on basic arithmetic and you are scrambling to keep up, but you can't because the teacher's charging ahead. Thankfully, advanced calculus is not on these tests. Or conversely, you are, ready to be reading Shakespeare and they're on C-spot run. You cannot control the pace of the class, and unless the class is moving at exactly the perfect pace for you, it's not necessarily being effective. You're either scrambling to keep up or you're bored out of your mind because you're itching to move forward. So the best way to prepare, if you can, and we highly recommend this, is with a tutor. And there are good tutors everywhere. I'm just throwing up a few logos for some that we work with, and I apologize to the others we work with whose logos I have not thrown up there. What can a good tutor do? And by the way, tutors are certainly available right now. If anything, they have more capacity right now than normal because some of those test dates have been canceled. So I really advise you, if you can, if you have the flexibility to do it, to try and get some tutoring lined up right now. So a good tutor can help you in a few different ways. Number one, of course, is content. None of us have perfect attendance or certainly perfect attentiveness all throughout high school. It's entirely possible that you just missed something or it never quite clicked for you. So if you've got that gap, a good tutor is certainly going to help you with that gap in math or reading or what have you. But there's a lot they do beyond content. There's strategies. A tutor will be able to explain to you that there are only a certain number of types of questions that they can ask in the math exam, for example, or with the reading exam. And there are reasons for that, which I'll get to in a minute. But if you can have a good tutor sort of break down for you the 11 different types of math questions, they each have a different number they use, but the principle is the same. If you can understand those different types of questions, then when you see a quadratic formula in there, you instantly sort of go, oh, it's a quadratic equation. The tutors help you see that. A good tutor, because they work one-on-one with you, can actually personalize your training. The best example we have of this is a student from, I think, last year, maybe the year before, who was at least sitting on maybe a 33 on the ACT, just hoping to get that 34, really wanted that one extra point. And sort of sat with the tutor, she got all the training, came time to take a mock exam, she gets a 31. Moving backwards. And the tutor's sort of looking at it, and she has missed math questions that they've been over, that she knows well. So he gives her 10 math questions to do, content that she knows well. She gets 7 right. All right. So he gives her just 5 questions. She gets all 5. Gives her another 5. She gets all 5. Gives her another 10. something like 7 or 8 once again. She says, okay, here's what's going on with you. You lose focus after 5 questions for whatever reason. So when you take the math test, every time you do 5 questions, I want you to put your pencil down and do nothing for 20 seconds. Stare at the ceiling, stare at the pencil, close your eyes, whatever it is you want to do. Just take that break, breathe it in, and then do another 5. Did that, started getting all 10 questions right again, takes the test again. When she actually took the ACT, got a 35. He was able to spot that gap in her and personalize his instruction. And of course, the last thing a tutor can do for you is give you a mock test. Remember I said you only want to take the test once? Well, you only want to take the test once at a test center for 3 hours on a Saturday morning, but you want to take that test a number of times as you study. Which brings me to my point that there are things you still have to do, even with a tutor. You have to study. Tutors will tell you that it takes a certain number of hours to raise your score as much as you want. 40 hours of studying to raise your score 80 points, let's say. Now, to get that combination, let's say it's 40 hours, over the course of 8 weeks, you can get, 8 to 10 hours with your tutor. You better be making up the rest on your own, self-studying. It's not effective otherwise. You do have to do the work. You do have to get the reps in. It's like getting your practice in as a musician. It's like getting your training in as an athlete. You do have to do the work. Now, I'm not asking you to do 25 hours a day, as if that were possible, of studying, but you should expect between sessions with your tutor that you're going to be spending 3 to 4 hours to actually get effective help from that tutor. Because you want to get that 40 hours of studying, I don't think whoever's a tutor particularly wants it to be a bunch of time with the tutor and then a tiny bit of self-studying. It's a very ineffective, inefficient, and expensive way to handle things. So please make the self-study a big part. All right. Now, let's talk about what we mean when we talk about a standardized test. It generally to you probably means, since you've been taking standardized tests in most cases since elementary school, that you sit in a room and you fill out multiple choice questions either on a computer or with a number 2 pencil. That's not actually what it means. What it means is that the results have to be standardized across different tests. We use standardized tests, or schools use standardized tests, as a way of being able to compare different environments. I know you're aware from your high school that there are teachers who grade differently. You put in the work, in one class you get a B+, in the other class you get an A. So different teachers have different standards. Trust me, different schools have different standards. A 3.8 at one school for your GPA is not necessarily the same as a 3.8 at another school. There's just no way with all the tens of thousands of high schools around the world that you're going to have that level of standardization. So standardized tests become a way of saying, okay, 1350 here, it's roughly the same as a 1350 here. All right, and that's true for everybody taking the test on the same day, but guess what? It has to be true no matter when the test is taken. If you took the test last December and got a 1350, the student who takes it next August gets a 1350. We want those two to be relatively comparable. Sort of say, okay, it means the same thing from test to test. Now, occasionally there's some recurring that happens, but that's very, very rare. Certainly when we are looking within a class, the class of 2021, no matter when you took the when you take the test, schools want to be able to sort of say, okay, we understand. So what I have here is something the College Board does to explain it. You can go to the College Board website to understand more about that. But what it really means is the questions just can't change that much from test to test. They cannot write a completely new test every single time and have any level of standardization. So when I said earlier about strategies, the questions repeat, guess what? They're asking you x plus 2y on one test and 2x plus y on another test. It's the same basic equation. The inputs may be slightly different. The actual numeric result may be slightly different, but the question format's the same. Same thing on the reading. I'm sure you've taken a PSAT at some point. How many times have you seen what's the main idea as a question? So as you study, as you're going through tutoring, as you're getting ready, we want you to start being able to look at these types of questions and just kind of spot them so that you understand what it is that's being asked repeatedly. In fact, you can even get to a point where
I would not do this on a real test, but as an exercise, once you've done some studying, take 10 math questions and try to answer them without actually doing any math. In other words, don't try to solve for x, but see if looking at the equation, you can spot. Usually what happens, you've got a few answer choices, you can eliminate 2 right away. It's just kind of ridiculous given the format of the question. If I see an x squared minus y squared question, I know that C is not going to be the answer to that question as I look at the choices. Great. And if you can do that and then, just sort of guess on the rest, and you suddenly find you're getting 6 or 7 right without even doing the math, that's really, really helpful, because there's going to come a time for most of you on the actual test where you don't have time to actually do the math to figure out the answer. Same thing with the reading. Now, the best way to prepare for reading, best way to prepare for anything, is to read frequently. I don't care what you read, but find something that you enjoy reading. So if you're into high literature, that's great. Most people aren't. I say that as a former English lit major. But there's something you read, some sort of nonfiction, some sort of informational thing. The more you read, the better you get at this stuff. And that's a useful skill, because when you get to the reading comprehension stuff, trust me, I say this as an English lit major from way back when, it's a lot of that stuff that's not stuff you would want to read. But if you started to develop the skills to sort of say, okay, I know how to look at this passage, I know I'm going to have to find the main idea, and here's my approach to doing that. Flip side is, if you're somebody who already loves to read, fantastic. You're going to have to get familiar with the question types, because you're not just reading about fishing paths for your own enjoyment here. You are trying to answer 4 specific questions. In that case, if you're already an active reader, I encourage you to spend a lot of time getting to know the question formats so that you know exactly what you're looking for and can move through that stuff fairly quickly. All right, other strategic stuff. The big day will eventually come when you have to take the test. Whatever format that takes, whenever that day comes, whether it's June, August, what have you, we're not going to be living like this forever. I'm pretty sure I know that. So a few things to keep in mind. Number 1, please take care of yourself. Eat healthy, drink a lot of water. Don't get a dehydration headache in the middle of the exam. The week of the exam, try to get to bed a little earlier than normal so you can get proper sleep. Why? Well, number 1, yes, there's a lot of science about how sleep deprivation works, and we're all more effective with a good night of sleep. But number 2, probably Friday night before the exam, you're a human being, you're going to be a little stressed, you're probably not going to sleep great. It's a lot nicer if you got a decent night of sleep on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so that sleep deficit you're getting Friday into Saturday is not quite such a kicker. Number 2, warm up on the morning of the test. My wife used to teach AP classes. She'd always give her students bananas the morning of the test, I think bagels or something. Just get yourself some brain food to get going. But also warm up your brain. I mentioned, if you're a musician or an athlete, you need to practice, right? You don't just, put your cleats on and race out onto the field. Now you do a little stretching and a little, warm up as you get out there. You play a few scales and get your fingers limbered up if you're a musician. Warm up your brain morning of. I'm not saying I want you looking at the hardest possible questions, but look at a couple of the questions as you're having that banana and bagel on the morning of, just to remind your brain how it works. It can make a few points of difference. And speaking of making a few points of difference, use the buddy system. If you can, find a friend who's taking the test the same time, same place, and carpool over to the exam. And on your way, talk about anything except the exam. It's a good way of just sort of giving yourself some positive energy on the way in, knowing that you're in this together and that life is not just about the SAT. Now, this does not work if your friend is highly stressed and highly anxious. Try and recognize that about your friends as well. But if you're able to be relaxed, we literally saw this a couple of years ago, 2 twins. One twin went with a buddy to the exam, the other did not, and had a 100-point difference in their scores. And I'm going to say it was at least partly attributable to the attitude going in. So Do wish you luck on your SAT or ACT when it comes. Encourage you to sign up for tutoring as soon as possible. It's a great time right now. And thank you all for joining us this evening. I want to encourage you to join us next week for a webinar which will cover summer programs, summer schools and camps. As far as I know, most summer programs are still on, but of course we know what times are like, and some of those may be canceled. It may not be quite the bad news you think if you were hoping for a big summer program, that it doesn't happen. And not just because everybody's in the same boat, although that's certainly the case. So I hope we see you next Thursday at 5:30 for that. And as always, I encourage you to email us with any questions. If you're already working with us, thank you. Hope you find the information useful. If you're not, you want a consultation, please let us know. We do free consultations as well. And if for some reason you're attending this webinar but they're not on our newsletter list, I'm going to leave that link up for a couple of seconds here. Get on our newsletter list, please, by all means. A lot of useful information, and you'll be kept apprised of future events. So thank you. Good evening to all of you. Keep safe and keep healthy, and good luck with all of your schoolwork, but also with your test preparation.